Welcome to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast, where my guests share their stories of addiction, how they recovered, and the tools and practices they use to stay sober now. Well, TJ, thank you so much for joining me.
So happy to be here with you again. I feel like it was just yesterday we were doing our episode, but I think it's been a little bit more than a day.
It's been a minute, and then I got an email from someone on your team, and they were like, "Hey, TJ's talking about this topic," and I was like, "Sign me up!" Listen, you have an open door where I am concerned. So, and listen, this is, gosh, what we're going to be talking about is really around polarization. How do we find more unity? And from what I was reading, it really looks like, we start with the man in the mirror, right? It's like we start with the internal self-examination. And I was reading through some of the questions and topics, and I thought, like, this is so timely. There is so much polarization. Social media is going nuts, as we thought it would. We knew it would. So I'm so glad you're here to be sort of like this ambassador of emotional sobriety for us today.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important. Every time there is a huge issue, in our culture, it seems to blow up. And then obviously, every 4 years during the presidential election, there is some intensity in terms of polarization, us and them, and right and wrong and good and bad. So I look forward to talking about how we can manage that and not only manage it, but I like to say, how do we stay sane in seemingly insane times? That's really what I'm
That
about.
That is the question. Yeah, the email I got, it's like the power of living in the question. So we'll have to talk a little bit about that. And we did do an episode with you before where you told your whole backstory, your recovery backstory, but you do so much work in the world of recovery. And you just facilitated an event recently. Do I have that accurate? Is that
You
right?
sure do. Yeah. Emergence Conference, September 17th and 18th. So it wasn't long ago. And it was quite remarkable and really a powerful experience. I'm kind of still floating from it. We had just incredibly dynamic speakers. And the focus of the conference was how to create and cultivate deeper connection. And that connection is connection with clients, because the conference is focused for people who are healers, coaches, counselors, techs, therapists, but it really applies to everyone. How do we maintain connection, which actually is exactly what we're talking about today.
Yeah, they say that alcoholism is a disease of isolation and connection is the cure, right? And so it's just so hard in this political climate. I mean, I've seen, I tried to stay off of Facebook, but occasionally, when I'm posting stuff about the podcast, I'll post stuff on there, and then I see things. And there's been this idea of, and I think, I wonder if you agree with this, that we can disagree and still be friends. But there's a little part of me that's like, if you are actively trying to take away my rights as a woman, that feels abusive, and I don't see how we can be friends. Like, if you're actively trying to take my rights away, how can we be friends?
Yeah, I mean,
So
it's
that's honestly how I feel. And so this feels like the antidote to this cuckoo.
well, and it's valid, right? It's absolutely valid to have those feelings. I think what happens is we end up then kind of coming from our woundology, and that's a phrase my friend Temple Hayes uses, and I love that. When I'm reacting out of my woundology, then I'm reacting out of anger, right? And then I'm in the fight. And it's not that the fight isn't seemingly justified or even understandable, but it's really is, what does that create, right? Is that really moving the needle? And that can be debated, because I have people who say, well, of course, like, as a gay man, people fought so that I could have the rights, right? So
Right.
there's no
Yeah.
denying that. But what I'm asking all of us right now is to take a look at, have we evolved enough that we're ready to move beyond the fight and really look at how we can maintain connection even in the midst of disagreement? And I think the key here is, if I believe I am my opinions, then that becomes really difficult. And as you said, when I then also see that my rights could be taken away, obviously that's something that can be very real. The issue, of course, is if you talk to someone on the seemingly other side, they'll say, well, you're trying to take away my rights or my freedom, right? So it's like, I hear now one side, if you will, is saying you're going to take away my rights. The other is you're going to take away my freedom. So it's very interesting to have conversations. And I think the questioning allows us to actually hear someone and understand why someone feels the way they do. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it. I think that's the big challenge for people. It's like if I'm going to maintain connection with you, I have to somehow co-sign or agree with your point of view, and that really just isn't true.
It really isn't true. Okay, you said something I kind of want to hone in on. I am my opinions. And I don't know, I was listening to so much stuff. I don't know if it's Adam Grant, his book, Think Again.
Mm,
And I think they talked about how we identify, like it's part of our identity. Our opinions become part of our identity. And when somebody challenges our opinions, we feel personally attacked.
that's right. Yeah,
And it's very hard to separate.
that's right. And then what ends up happening is we end up building coalitions or communities, and we use terms like-minded people. I need to find the people, my like-minded people. But what we're really saying, if we drill into that a little bit, is like, I need to find people who agree with me. And I mean, creating a world where we find people who only agree with us, first of all, I don't think it's possible, right? I don't,
Yeah.
even if I find someone who agrees with 90% of my opinions, there's still going to be something we have a different point of view about. So
Yeah.
I think it's really deeply ingrained because if you look at the evolution of the human species, we used to have to have tribes to literally survive. We had to like be safe in our cave so we wouldn't get eaten. And having a tribe and fighting was a way to stay alive. And we know that those genetics get passed down, right? We know that that affects multiple generations. So there's this sense that if we disagree, somehow you're not like me. And the greatest travesties of the world have happened when we're able to successfully other a group of people and dehumanize them. And the extreme examples are like the Holocaust, but we could name many other ones.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really tough position to come from. And it's like so up in our face right now. But what's interesting is I've also noticed, there's, dare I say, family members who are think very different from me, and I still love them. It's like there's like degrees. Like if you're an acquaintance or a stranger, I'm not letting you off the hook. But if you're a family member and I have to be around you, I might look past it. But do you know what I mean? It's like it's almost as if like not knowing somebody, it's easy like it's easier to hate somebody you don't know.
That's right. And that's why social media is the phenomenon that it is. It's very easy. I actually have wanted to, and I haven't yet done this, and I'm going to guess that someone has done this, but I wanted to bring people together who wrote comments. Because if you read the comments, maybe even on this, we'll read the comments and people will have opinions, right? I want to bring people together and have them face to face as real humans and read the comments to each other and see the felt sense, how we can dehumanize. You know, it's like when we're in a car, we're not angry at the driver, we're angry at the car, right? It becomes inanimate. It's like this isn't a human being, this is a car. And I think that's even more heightened with social media. It's like I'm not really acknowledging. We see this with celebrities. People just go after celebrities and like they're human beings, right? These are human beings. And if they're smart enough, hopefully, or they've had enough pain, they don't read the comments anymore. But if they do, that can be really difficult.
Yeah, I don't think we were designed to know what everybody is thinking. And it's just, I saw a debate, it's started on a meme. I'm lurking. I don't participate anymore because when I start getting into arguments with strangers on the internet, like that's my sign that there's something I'm avoiding, something I don't want to feel. And I just, something's not right in my world. Um, but yeah, I don't want to, like, always shocked when people say these things, and I'm like, I can't believe that people really think this. Like, I don't, and then I go, I don't think I'm supposed to know. I'm just like, I don't think as humans we're really supposed to know really what everybody thinks. Like, I don't really want to know all of everybody's opinions.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's one thing to have an opinion and to have safe enough relationships where we can share divergent opinions and still remain connected. have conversations about it. It's another thing to believe that I am my opinions and I have to have this tribe of people who agree with me. And if you disagree, as you said, I take this as a personal assault, and then that wound is touched, and then I'm reacting from that. And that reactivity that shows up as anger or judgment is actually quite violent, and it contributes to the violence of the world. So people, I have a friend from I've known since 1983 who was not happy with me online because basically said, "What, I'm done. I'm not doing this kind and loving thing. It doesn't work. I'm going to call
Oh,
people out, right? And I know
oh, yeah.
about kindness and love, but the question isn't, am I right? The question is, what's it creating, right? So like, is name calling creating more peace and more love? Are we moving the needle, or are we creating more division? And when we think of violence, we think of things like, gun violence, which of course is, but judgment and criticism and the things we read online, that's also contributing to the violence of the planet. And fair enough if people still want to live on a violent planet, but I don't. I want us to evolve to a place which I know we can get to, and that is to be more loving and more peaceful.
Yeah, that's the tricky part is remaining I know in my mind like love is the answer. But when you say things like I hear people like, I'm gonna say it like it is. I'm gonna call people out. It's like it's like the absence of compassion and empathy. It's like this, it's I think that comes from a place of frustration. You were talking about this wounding. So can you help me understand like where does that wounding what is that wounding that you're talking about? Because if I'm perceiving an attack, that feels very real to me. Like words hurt, like we're talking about gun violence, stuff like that. But the criticism, like sometimes like when I have engaged with trying to have a discussion with somebody and it hurts, like it really hurts and it bugs me forever. Like it like ricochets in my mind over and over again and it's hard
And
to let go of.
yeah, and then I have a choice, right? Am I going to work with that, or am I going to continue the reactivity and continue creating more pain and harm in the world? And it's understandable. So, perfect example in my own story, growing up as a little gay boy in the Midwest. I was born in, I hate to admit it, but here I go, 1965, right? So that
Right
era
behind you.
was not super pleasant for little gay boys, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
was called the
yeah.
F
You
word
were in danger.
almost every day, right? And so that's a very serious trauma. I believe it was at least in part that led to my addiction, getting into
Yeah.
recovery and starting to heal some of that. I can, if it's unhealed and someone says something that I perceive would be taking away my right, I'm going to react, right? A lot of
Okay.
activism lives from that. How dare you, right? And there's violence, understandable. And it could be debated whether or not it's also effective. But I know that ultimately, if we don't heal that and rise above that, we just continue the cycle of violence, right? And it becomes very simple. And again, the question isn't is my opinion right or wrong? It's what is my sharing my opinion or being angry or judging? What is that creating? And what do I really want to create? It doesn't mean I need to agree with the other person. It means I can be curious. And I think curiosity, here's a perfect example. So, my dad and my stepmom, I live in LA, right? And my dad and my stepmom came to
You're
visit.
aren't you in like West Hollywood?
I'm in West Hollywood, yeah.
Yeah.
But my dad and his wife say, well, we live in LA too, Lower Alabama. Right. And so my stepmother, she's been in my life for many, many years, said, I was told by people in Alabama that people in LA were not going to be friendly, but everyone's so friendly. Right. So like there was a cognitive dissonance of like, why is everyone so friendly? And I just said, don't worry, if we walked around here in this LA and said, what do you think of Lower Alabama? I'm sure some people would have some judgment as well, right? So it's that judgment that creates this divisiveness, and it's based in what? It's like, San Francisco for some reason hates LA, but if I ask people why, they don't really know, or they have these things they say, but it's not my experience of people in LA. So it's like being curious helps move the needle for sure.
Yeah, curiosity. Yeah, because when you're curious, that sort of implies you don't have all the answers,
Right.
and it gets you away from being right. I've heard Tara Brach say this old expression. It's like there's two groups of people: those who think they are right, and that's the end of the phrase because everybody thinks they're right.
That's right. There are two
So
groups of people, everyone who thinks they're right.
yeah, so we really are united.
Yeah, well, because here's the thing. We have been told that we live in a polarized country. But
Mhm.
I actually, in my experience, it's really that we've been conditioned to have polarized thinking. And so, what do I mean by that? I mean, I am right, and therefore you are wrong. Or sometimes I can believe that there's something wrong with the way I see the world. I go into shame or blame, so you must be right. But when we move beyond the constructs of right and wrong and start to open up to seeing that it's possible that people have differing points of view, someone born in Manhattan is not going to have the same life experience as someone born in Calcutta, but we wouldn't really say one of them is right and one of them is wrong. They just have different life experiences, different decisions they've made, different childhoods, different traumas, different, just different experiences. So when we're curious, we can start to understand why someone has the point of view that they have. I can understand why a group of people is going to vote for a certain person. I am not going to make that decision to vote for that person, nor do I agree necessarily, but I can understand if I really listen to their story, why they have that point of view.
So it's really about understanding their point of view, like getting curious about, oh, why do you think it, and this kind of scares me actually, like why do you think this way? Because that kind of leads into, but I guess if I just stay with the open, is your suggestion that we stay with the open-ended questions and just kind of like we don't have to try to debate? Because I think the temptation there is to want to insert information.
Right.
And the thing is that it's been really difficult to find any source of truth. Because like you were saying earlier in the beginning, like what we're hearing from both sides, taking away my freedom, taking away my rights,
Yeah,
I'm hearing like the same things from both
that's
sides.
right.
So we,
And
nope, yeah, it's so hard.
now we have AI. Now we have political figures that like I can be saying something, but I actually never said it. Right. We're getting there
Right.
technologically. And we have certain political figures that I say, there's no way he really said that. But then he did.
Then
Right.
he
So
did.
and
And then I'm looking around and I'm like, y'all are hearing this.
right,
You're hearing this, but you're not hearing this. And truth be told, I think they're all crazy.
right.
Like I think they're all problematic.
Yeah. And so
That's just me.
then that point of view, of course, because then we have confirmation bias, right? This group of people is
There it
crazy.
is.
And so I'm gonna see them as crazy, and everything they say is gonna sound crazy to me. And then when we have social media, because what happens is we find safety in groups of people who agree with us. And there's something to be said about that, right?
Yeah.
And really, we talk a lot about red state, blue state. But the truth is, if you really look at, even if you're just looking politically, it's really more of an urban, suburban, rural thing. It's really across the
Yeah.
board, right? Like, for example, there is no conservative city in America anymore in terms of voting. Not anymore, right?
Really?
They've all been blue for quite some time over a certain population, any major city. But like, I know people on the West Coast because I lived in Texas for some years and they're like, there's all this judgment about Texas, but it's like not everyone agrees because the government is doing this, right? It would be like traveling to Paris and them saying, when Donald Trump was president, I believe with everything Donald Trump said, right? Well, he's your president, so you must agree with him, right? So I think sometimes we get
Right.
into this like thinking instead of like pausing and I'm going to go back to like I think the deeper issue here is what's getting touched. That
Okay.
wound is getting touched, and then I'm reacting. And if someone has an opinion that feels scary to me, then it's easier, it seems easier to react instead of like, let me feel what I'm feeling right now.
So there's a couple of things I'm hearing, sort of at the core of all this is like a need for safety, but it comes from the original childhood wounding. Is that fair?
I think so. I think it's
Yeah.
fair. Yeah,
So our work as people who want to foster peace is to do our own emotional healing. Maybe, and truth be told, when we have these kinds of situations, it's like it brings all our stuff up. And that's when we can deal with it. So I know it's painful. We're in a painful time. But if we look at this through a spiritual lens as an opportunity, it's like, oh, this is triggering all my stuff. So this is an opportunity to work with it to heal that wound.
that's right. And if I look at it as an opportunity to heal, not only am I going to heal myself, but then I can heal these relationships too. Because, for example, when I was in my 20s, there were certain family members that I just never wanted to talk to because I knew where they were politically, and that wasn't okay with me. And I was in this they need to change point of view.
Oh, yeah.
And now I'm like, I can sit down and have conversations. Like I went on a cruise with my family, and I know that we have differing points of view.
Uh-huh.
And like I can actually talk with them about it because I want to genuinely hear why they believe what they believe. And I want to be clear about something because I think someone, watching or listening right now might hear me saying, let's agree to disagree, but then we're just gonna like, roll over and take it. And that's when I want to change something, what am I going to stand for instead of what am I going to stand against? Because I think that's the true change that happens. I think about, I'll go back to my own personal story and people in high school. And, like I see some of my friends on high school, and I know some of those people called me the F word, but I can remain connected with them because in my being open to them, they can ask me questions. They can become educated. They can realize that, we are more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
I think it's so easy to get hooked or to get trapped, and someone might hear me saying like, "Well, I'm just gonna like let people abuse me." No, not at all. I think that the way that we've been, which is fighting, it just doesn't really work. That's the bottom line.
That is the bottom line. I thought it was so interesting to hear you say that you would actually talk about the actual issues with your family members, because with my family members that are very committed to something that I don't agree with, we just don't talk about that. And I love them and I respect them and admire them. And I'm so grateful for them to have them in my life. And we just don't talk about that thing.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is that you actually talk about the thing.
I mean, I think, listen, if it's either I'm gonna fight or I'm not gonna talk about the thing, I will choose not talk about the thing.
Okay.
Right. But if I'm in a place where I realize what's getting touched and I'm willing to look at that and I'm willing to stay open and ask open-ended questions, I remember my friend Kay Aloha would say, I love when someone has a strong disagreement with me, but what I commit to is asking 4 times what makes you believe that, or tell me more, or why do you believe that, or where did that belief come from, or where did that idea come from? And he said, if he would actually listen instead of react, by the fourth time he would understand. He would understand, not
Wow.
agree. That's the trap, right? People think, oh, so we're going to agree, or we're going to agree to disagree. No, we're going to stay connected, because if I know I came into the world with no opinions, I
Right.
didn't come into the world with opinions. An
Mhm.
infant does not have opinions. We get programmed to have them.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean that we want to like pretend like we don't have them, or not have a point of view, or not know what we want to stand for, whether that's rights or equality. Um, but to look at a person and say, this human came in with no opinions. I wonder what that programming, where did it come from? Let me genuinely hear.
Let me genuinely hear. It's so interesting, asking 4 times because I do the 5 whys, you
Mm,
know, when it's like when you want to get to the root of, why somebody wants something, like the 4 whys. It's like, well, what is it that you want? What is important about that? What's important about that? And that's where you get to like the core belief.
yep.
And so this seems like a very non-threatening way to at least try to understand the core of what someone's trying to get to. I feel like at the end of the day, we all want the same things. We all want safety, peace, and love and connection.
You just named it. And that's exactly what I was going to say. There was a survey done of Americans, and the number one thing Americans want is safety. And so for some people, safety is build a wall. For other people, safety is take the wall down. For some people, it's get rid of all guns. For other people, it's we need more guns. Right. And when I move beyond that, I'm not saying that again, I don't have to like agree with the quote unquote other side, but like when I realize what we're all trying to do is stay safe. And you also said something about a core belief. In my experience, we all come into the world open and opinionless, as I said, right? But to me, it's like we're very connected spiritually, and then we get programmed by the world, whether that's, teachers or religious institutions, educational systems, and then we have this point of view. But with wounding, we have these core false beliefs. And if my core false belief is I'm unworthy, I might externalize that, right? I might,
Yeah.
not want you to see that. But when I healed enough of it, it's okay for me to like hold you in a different opinion. I
You
mean,
know,
I
I
have
was
some really close friends. We have very different opinions on gun rights and gun control, very different. And I can honor them. I don't have to like, okay, now I agree with you. It's not really about that.
so it's not I agree with you, it's I understand you. I understand you. And that's all we ever want is to be seen, heard, and understood.
That's right.
And it feels like that really, a lot of this sounds like de-escalation, right? Everything's getting escalated. We're all scared and our safety is being threatened. And so this process that you're talking about of living in the question is about de-escalation, just this under the difference between understanding and agreeing.
Yeah. And I think the deeper work is to ask myself the questions.
Yeah.
One thing to ask someone else, where did you get your opinions? But to ask myself, where did I start believing this is the right way? What do I experience when I believe that? What am I actually feeling right now? What am I deeply afraid of? Because people are very heightened now. Like, I'm not going to survive. Democracy is not going to survive. Interestingly enough, I hear people on like both sides of the political spectrum afraid that democracy is not going to survive. But the
Yeah.
projection is the other side's about to take it away. And I'm just curious about that, right? I mean, obviously, I have my point of view,
Yeah.
but when I can move beyond that and be curious, because ultimately that creates more connection. And through that connection, we can, when we get our needs met that you named, seen, heard, and validated, the fight lessens automatically. And then we can start having dialogues that make a difference in the world.
Yeah. I think I just kind of got it, a little aha moment that when we are trying to be understood, we are trying to insert, like, I find myself wanting to offer information. But when I'm curious and asking questions, I'm receiving information. So that's like yeah, because, okay, I get it. I think I can stay in that place of receiving information.
And the key for me is to notice what I'm feeling when someone has an opinion to me that is either startling or, my mind is like, I disagree with that. Well, let me tell you how you're wrong, right? I notice the reactivity. And then if I can breathe, I can notice that I'm wanting to defend. And in that defense, of course, I'm pushing people away.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear. Wasn't A Course in Miracles teaching that defense is really another form of attack?
It's absolutely a judgment. And this might be a provocative statement, but
Ooh, lay it on me.
a judgment is one of the greatest act of violence that we can have, whether it's a judgment of myself or another.
Ooh, that's good. Because yeah, we judge ourselves all the time.
And that's a very, I'm inflicting harm to myself when I'm doing that. And if I feel broken,
Yeah.
I perceive the world as broken.
Yeah, I've often said that we can't escape the same measuring stick that we judge others by, right? And so if you're judging somebody as being closed-minded or ignorant, or like those are the things that, we're all tempted to say about the quote other side.
Yeah.
But I have those places there. I recognize those times in me where I'm just like, I'm just not going to listen.
Yeah.
Like it's like active defiance. Like I just can't hear it anymore. I've unfriended people so that I don't have to see what feels like hate speech. But that's me actively being closed-minded, and that's not
Yeah, and
fun.
for me, sort of if I'm going to call it maybe the advanced course, if I have a judgment about someone, I pause and I ask myself, and this is genuinely what I've been doing for a couple of decades now. I notice I have a judgment because, by the way, that's what the mind does. It sorts, it separates. Is this person safe or unsafe? Is this right or wrong, good, bad? Right. So
Discernment.
the mind will constantly do it, just like the lungs are breathing. I'm not thinking about breathing, it's happening. Judgment is happening. That's just an automatic response, but I'm not responsible for my first thought, but I am responsible for what I do with it.
Ooh,
And
that's good.
what I do with it is I pause and I say, in what way have I acted that way?
Yee.
And if I'm willing to look, it's always true.
Yeah.
And another way to say, I would, again, perhaps a provocative statement, but someone's judgment is a confession. And then I
If you
ask
spot it, you
myself,
got it.
right? And that goes both ways, right? Oh my gosh, she's so kind and loving. That's because
Yeah.
there's a place within me that's kind and loving, so I see it. Oh, she's such a gossip. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
buddy. Little
right.
character assassination.
Yeah.
It used to
And
be my favorite game.
it was my favorite game until it became so painful.
Right. Yeah.
And it wasn't even about like the other person. It was like, oh, I can literally feel the toxicity coursing through my veins when
Yes.
I'm gossiping. I can
Yeah.
feel it. There's like a sensation of like, oh, and we know now
Yeah.
that affects our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, and our spiritual health.
Yeah.
That, science is starting to measure that now. That judgment, that restriction causes
Mhm.
literal disease in the body. That's no longer just a theory. That science is proving that.
Yeah. I love how science is catching up to spirituality. Like
Yes.
I'm a science girl. I love a scientific explanation.
Mhm.
I pretend I'm logical. I love, I love this idea that judgment is a confession.
Yeah.
And I like that, I think it was Dan Millman, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, wrote about how people are just mirrors. You can't love or hate something about somebody else unless it's something you love or hate about yourself. In the rooms of recovery, they say, oh, if you're pointing your finger at somebody, you have three fingers pointing back at you. Or, did you say Lower Alabama, LA?
LA, yeah, Lower Alabama.
Yeah. Pot calling the kettle black. And I feel like that's like a Southern expression. I kind of shortened it down to if you spot it, you got it.
That's right.
I think it was even Deepak Chopra that was like, if you can use this concept as, if you can use it in the right way, it could be used for self-evolution.
Oh, absolutely. Because when
Yeah.
I'm aware of that, well, first of all, for me, the first phase was like, oh, I understand the phrase ignorance is bliss. When I became aware that every judgment, because it's not 90%, it's every judgment I have
Every
is something
judgment.
about myself. And it's not that everything I see I have, it's the ones that hook me. So let's be clear about that. If someone comes up to me and says, "You are such a bank robber," there is not going to be any button pushed. I've not robbed a bank. I've actually never considered robbing a bank. I've never fantasized about robbing a bank. It just has not been in my consciousness. There is no button there. So I can see someone rob a bank. So I wouldn't say, well, I mean, I have an inner bank robber in me. I mean, sure, you could.
Right.
But it's those things where I get hooked. That's
Yeah.
the information. And that's, I believe, probably what Deepak was saying, because, Don Miguel Ruiz says, it's not your words that hurt me, it's that you've touched an unhealed wound.
Yeah.
And what I add to that is the wound is getting touched, and you said it earlier, because it's wanting to heal. So I have a choice at that moment. Am I going to take the opportunity? I don't know if you remember the presence process or if you know the presence process. It was a phenomenon maybe 10 years ago. And the final step in this is thank you to the sender, right? If it's someone who has
Oh,
someone, thank you because you've given me the opportunity to see where there's more growth that's possible.
Yeah, that is like black belt spirituality when you can be grateful to the person who hurt you.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say that yeah, they're our biggest teachers, the people that you're the most pissed at. Yeah, like I heard somebody say that to me the other day. It's like, oh, if someone said you had green hair, you wouldn't get upset about that because you would know it's not true.
Right.
Like it has zero effect. But I like that idea of the hook, that is that's like a red flag. That's the indication, oh, there's a wound here that needs to be healed. Let's bring compassion.
Yeah. And usually what we do is we say, well, that person's narcissistic or that person's toxic or they shouldn't have said that. And that can
Yeah.
be true, but that's not going to heal anything. Right.
Right. Identifying
So
it as.
we end up
Do you think
debating.
that do you think that that term narcissism is just being thrown around all the time
Oh,
now?
absolutely. Now in the TikTok psychology, is anyone who I don't like is a narcissist.
If we broke up, it's because he was a
Yeah,
narcissist.
because I don't want to be responsible for the part that I've played in this. I remember when I was early in my recovery
There
and
it
I
is.
just started sponsoring people, I noticed a trend.
Oh, what was the
The
trend?
trend was, because in 12-step recovery, we ask people to look at their part,
Yeah, what is your
of
part in
course,
this?
this is a long time ago for me, but and the trend was my part was I showed up. And I was like, wow, people keep saying that. And then I was looking at and so I would say to people, and by the way, you're not allowed to say my part is I showed up, right? Because there's so much
Shut,
more
I shut
than
up.
I showed up and this person's abusive, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, there's got to be more than that. Yeah, I do see that as a pattern.
Yeah.
It's like, somebody that's really resentful at somebody, and it's like, well, they showed you who they were the first time, and then you went back for that, so that's kind of on you.
Yeah, and the thing is, if we because what ends up happening is we think that we're what someone might be hearing us saying, don't blame them, blame yourself. That's not what we're saying. It is, I am the chooser. I'm going to empower myself because people will say, well, that's victim blaming. If someone is abusive, they're the problem. Right. But I keep choosing them, not because it's my fault, but because something within me, a core false belief, an idea I have about myself, is allowing me to choose that, not to attract it. Because
Right.
that's still not being empowered. It's like, no, I have so in my early recovery, for example, my core false belief that was just the dominant one was I'm unlovable. So I kept choosing these relationships and I would say, like, if he could just love me. Right? Why is he so unavailable? And I realized on the fifth one, like, oh, huh, I'm the one that keeps going to these relationships, not what's wrong with me, but I wonder what that's about. That's again using these open-ended questions.
Do you want to hear my dirty little secret?
Absolutely. Is this going to be a confession?
It's just a confession. Yeah, it's a confession. When I was in my early 20s, I kept going for emotionally unavailable men.
Yeah.
They were often married,
Right.
occasionally. And I just want, for the record, the only married man I date now is my husband.
Just for the record.
For the for
Like
the
I do
record,
date a married man, my husband.
my husband. Yeah, I'm dating a married man.
Yeah, I mean, my version of that is I was in a relationship with five guys in a row who were either in the closet or straight or confused about their sexuality. They could not possibly. They were
Right.
wonderful humans. I was like, oh, they're so wonderful. Why can't they love me? And it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I was like, oh, they're so wonderful, but why do I keep? Why do I keep? And
I
it's
I
some
did that too. Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I haven't talked about this in a long time, but what I realized after I got sober was that I was going after the emotionally unavailable man because I had like this fear of intimacy. I did not want them to see me. Like I couldn't, it was very difficult for me. Like how they say that the nice guys finish last? It's because they didn't align with my beliefs of what I felt I deserved.
That's right. And it's a vibration, right? It's not even a thought. So Like mine was I'm unlovable. So I would walk into a room full of people and I would literally find the frequency. All this is happening on the unconscious level. Like, oh, he seems so great, right? That rush of excitement. I remember a friend of mine in my early recovery would say, if you walk into a room and you see that person and you feel that rush of excitement, run the other way. Because it's like that rush of excitement is that congruence. And when I start to heal that, because if someone, if I believe I'm unlovable and there's someone who really wants to love me, I will literally recoil.
Yeah.
Like it's not possible for me to accept that love.
It's like, ew, what's wrong with you if you want me?
Right. And it's usually unconscious. It's like, oh, I don't know. I don't like that person.
Yeah, they make me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's so funny. Um, yeah, so back to the solution, which is to go within and offer compassion. Because I wanted to circle back to when we were talking about victim blaming. It wasn't about, it's so funny because it's very easy to confuse blame with needing to take responsibility.
Absolutely.
But I think like that there's something about empathy and compassion in there that, seems to be the antidote. Brene Brown is kind of famous for saying that empathy is the antidote to shame. And so when I, do that self-examination and I recognize, oh, I'm the one who's choosing these people, the next question is why?
Yeah.
Why? Where's the wound?
Right.
Where is the, that's like, it's sad. It's not a judgment thing.
Yeah. And then what you're saying is then when I can immediately go to compassion and empathy for myself, there's an opportunity to heal instead of going to blame. And it's interesting because it's a parallel process to what we're talking about with politics.
Yeah.
Right? Because like it's not about their right. It's not about saying like, I mean, I remember heartbreaking that when I worked in treatment and this person is now a friend of mine and her first day in treatment, she said, but it's my fault. He only hits me when I drink. And the whole
Oh.
room just went, I'll never forget. I feel the feeling right now. The whole room just went, right?
Yeah.
And so we're not saying it's okay that he hit her, but
Right.
there's something within her because she couldn't leave him, right? So she had this idea that it's my fault because I drink, right? And then he gets angry. And so, like, let's go deeper. And
Yeah.
it
Let's go
is, what
deeper.
is it about yourself that you keep showing up for this? And right, there were kids and there were other reasons and there were a lot. But ultimately, as she did her own healing, she was able to leave that relationship. But it wasn't about he's a bad or horrible person. I mean, obviously hitting a person is never okay. And she needed to get out. But if
Right.
all we did was say he's the bad guy, you need to get out, where there's the deeper healing couldn't happen. And she became empowered when
Right.
she said, "Oh my gosh." And I remember, working with her and when she got in touch with, "Oh my gosh, I've chosen this. Not that I'm to blame. I can now start to heal that so I do have the ability to leave." Right?
Yeah.
It's
That's the
almost
empowerment.
counterintuitive.
You know what's interesting though, TJ, is when I'm working with women and they start talking about their partners in a way that they're abusive, I never put them in a position that they have to defend him.
Right.
I
Right.
never say, oh, he's horrible, he's bad, he's abusive, he's a narcissist, whatever. It's like it's like an acknowledgement, a validation, and then let's raise your level of self-esteem because when it's high enough, like the law of 51%, it's like the balance scale. Once you have a little more on one, it's just the tipping point.
That's
All
right.
you need, you don't have to be all healed. You
That's
just
right.
have to be healed enough to the tip the balance scale.
And sometimes it's just asking the question, and that takes courage. And I'm thinking about this person and other people who I've worked with that were in a physically abusive, situation. And right, so the phrase "nothing could be truer but less useful." Like if we just blame the abuser, like yeah, that's true. I mean, we're not denying that that's a horrific thing, but the healing, because we know people will leave that and find themselves in another abusive situation unless they do the healing. And again, it's not blame, it's actually empowering. And I
Yeah.
remember that when we can get to the question, I wonder what that's about, with compassion and love. And then
Mm.
I remember working with this veteran once. Actually, I was doing a training, and there were a lot of vets in the room, and he started crying just spontaneously, and he said, "For the first time, I understand. I grew up in a war zone, and then I chose one."
Whoa.
And his body was literally shaking, like he was literally like processing that he had chosen that life. And again, it's not like
Wow.
to blame him, but to say, and I sensed with him, he had this compassion for the child
Mm.
that just didn't really even have a conscious choice. Just, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
go into the military. Yeah, I'll go to Iraq. Like, so that's what we're talking about here with the deeper healing that is being asked of us right now.
Man, it is being asked. It is being, yeah. So this is such a timely conversation because it is time for us it's a really unique opportunity for us to really, instead of getting triggered, or if we are triggered, if we got that hook, to ask the questions, start asking the questions. And I wanted to kind of just glance over this list that your team had sent me. Um, can you give more examples of questions there's examples of questions that can create greater connection?
Yeah. Um, I mean, we've kind of talked about it, but I remember when I was learning to do conscious listening, I knew I was supposed to look at you and nod, but I was
Here I am.
also, what I was unaware of is that I was actually responding instead of actually hearing you. So
Oh,
I do an exercise in a training I do where we set the timer for 3 minutes, and I just say to you, "What are you experiencing?" And you answer, and then I ask again, "What are you experiencing?" And the idea is to see, how present am I really? And if I'm not allowed to ask a new question, it kind of calls the question like, let me actually hear what you're experiencing.
wow.
And then what happens is the person who's answering then also starts to become more aware of what they're actually experiencing. I mean, sometimes there's resistance to the process, but ultimately, if I'm truly present, so questions that create connection are, tell me more, which I
Yeah.
know isn't really a question, but when in doubt, tell me more. Uh,
Yeah.
where did you get this belief? Where did this originate? Um, what would be the highest and best outcome for you? Some of my very favorite open-ended questions that I will ask myself in many times is, how does it get even better than this? It's like, okay, I just had a car accident. How does it get better than this? I just got this big promotion that I want. How does it get even better than this? Right? Or what else is possible? What else is possible is perhaps my favorite question. What else is possible here? If I look at like what's happening with divisiveness, or if I see an issue in a relationship, or I see someone in an active addiction, what else is possible here can start opening us up. Because again, curiosity expands and judgment constricts.
Yes, it does. Oh my goodness. Wow, I feel like you've given us so much to think about. This is a lot to digest. I'm going to be listing some of these questions in the show notes that people can refer back to. Is there another place that you have this information? I feel like this is a lot to digest. They're going to have to listen to this a couple times.
Yeah, actually, in I think in all three of my books, I have a section called Living in the Question, because it's something that's been so life-changing for me. I know for sure in Conscious Recovery, there's a whole section Living in the Question. So that's a place people can access it. I know I've made some videos specifically on what it means to live in the question. And also I have workbooks, and in the workbooks, there's a whole set of questions that we ask. But really, it's any open-ended question, meaning it can't be answered with yes or no, that allows us to start becoming curious instead of going right to an opinion. And it's so funny because it's also how I ask the question. Well, what makes you think that? I mean, that's an open-ended question.
Yeah, tone is every
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
but what
yeah.
did they
And
say that the communication is 80% body language?
well, it's interesting you say that. It's actually, yeah, it's like 85% or something. that's nonverbal, but to me, most
Nonverbal.
of it's actually energy.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you look at, and if someone's watching or listening and says, oh, that sounds a little out there, animals are very connected with energy, right? So even as animals that we are, we're more than that, we hope, but we're also animals. That's why equine therapy is so powerful. The horse isn't reacting to your body language, they're picking up your energy.
I was just gonna say, a while back, I had a girlfriend who had an equine therapy. That's like she was a therapist and she had horses, and that's what she did. And she invited me. Listen, I set foot in that pasture. I'm a city girl.
Yep.
I set foot in that pasture, and I was on like another planet. Like I did not know how to act. I didn't know how to be. It was so foreign to me. And she gave me some guidance, and then we went into the ring and I tried to get the horse to run, and then the horse's head would dip, and she'd be like, "What were you thinking right there?" And I was like, "I think the horse is mad at me."
Mhm.
She could see what I was thinking by looking at the horse because a horse is a prey animal, so they've developed these
That's right.
senses to interpret energy. I just thought that was wild.
Yeah, I mean, when I was first starting to play with this idea of energy, the instruction from my teacher was to, if we had pets, which I did, is to go home and sit on your couch, not near your pet, but send them different kinds of energy and see what they do. And I mean, it was fun to kind of angry energy, and my cat would react. My cat would leave, or my cat would jump up on something. I'm like, I'm not changing my body language. The instruction was just to sit still and then to send them love. And, kind of, I guess, sort of a quick story. So, our dog now, Cowboy, was unadoptable and specifically did not like men. And I'm like, well, we're two men, but we want to come meet him, right? And 18 months, no one could adopt him. And he
Oh,
was living with this wonderful couple. They had a rescue in their home and sweet older couple. And we went and I just all I did is I sat on the ground and I sent him love. And I did it for like a half an hour. And he came over and sat in my lap. And the people could not believe it. Could
wow.
not believe it. They're like, he has bitten people. He's jumped out of people's arms. He's run from people. He's barked at people. We've never seen this. And then he also did the same thing with Will. So it's a very real thing, but most of us have been had that taught out of us, quite frankly. Like we end up valuing the intellect. And isn't it interesting? It goes right back to that same story. The intellect is what separates us in these conversations where we seemingly disagree.
Where we seemingly disagree. That is the truth.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try that with my dog. He's an English bulldog though, so he's pretty thick.
You never know.
I'm gonna try. He's
Try
my
it.
little he's my little shadow anyway.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely try that. Maybe I'll try it with the neighbors' cats. They always come into my yard.
There you go.
They're not afraid of the dog, let me tell you. Hilarious. Well, this has been so enlightening and always so much fun to chat with you. I always learn so much from you. This is great. And so where can people find you online?
TJWoodward.com is the best, or Instagram is TJ Woodward underscore. And I loved our conversation today. I'm actually feeling so much gratitude in my body from just having this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It was super helpful. It was great to be with you, my friend. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, thank you.